Hey everybody, Jay Weidner here, Reality Check. Thanks for watching and everything. Today we have back Jerry Marzinsky. He's the psychologist who studied in various places and began to realize that mental illness is not what we have been told. It's going to be a great show. Um, my film JFKX is up on Amazon Prime. It's a big hit, and I'm really happy because you guys made it a big hit, even though I've been kind of blacked out by the community. All right, so let's get to the show because I know you guys love this subject. All right, hey Jerry, how you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm glad to be back on with you and glad to have brought Lynn on with us
Yeah,
today too. I think it's going to be very interesting what she has to say. You know, as you guys already know, I've been studying the psychotic voices, the voices schizophrenics here
yeah,
for 4.5 decades now, and it's clear that they run patterns. And if they're running patterns, they can't be hallucinations like the psychiatric mafia insists they are. You know, hallucinations don't run patterns, they're random. I don't know
right.
if you've been around hallucinations. They don't run patterns. These voices run repeatable, predictable patterns, and some 23 of them we found. Again, if they run patterns, they can't be hallucinations. So the only thing that the psychiatric mafia insists that respond to schizophrenia is their toxic medications. Right. Now, these medications are some of the most dangerous used in medicine today. They actually shrink the human brain and rot out the peripheral nervous system. And some of the long-term patients we've had in the state hospital, they were afflicted by something they called the Thorazine shuffle, which means their brains were rotted out by these psychotropic drugs, and they would go into this shuffle. Now, the big pharma and the psychiatric mafia said, oh, that's due to the schizophrenia. No, it's due to their drugs. Now there's over 3 million people in the United States now with schizophrenia. You know, neither big pharma or psychiatry know the cause of schizophrenia. So
Right.
what they've done is they first blamed it on mothers, and the mothers went, wait a minute, we didn't do anything. And you could see that. I mean, the population could see. So they had to boost it up somewhere where it couldn't be seen. So they came up with the genetic explanation. Oh, it's due to a genetic problem. And then when they couldn't find a single gene for it, then they went, well, it's a multiple genetic problem. But then the geneticists who were looking into this went, hey, we don't see any schizophrenia gene. So with that wipe, they got away with that for about 10 years or something like that. So when the geneticist who studied this found no genetic gene, then they had to come up with something else that the population and even most doctors and researchers couldn't see. So going from mothers, they kicked it down to geneticists, which is a tiny fraction of the population. So when they said, hey, we don't see anything, then they kicked it up and said it's a biochemical imbalance of the brain, made up by Eli Lilly in the 70s, totally fabricated to sell their antidepressant drugs. And then big pharma controlling the universities started teaching it. And now you have thousands of psychiatrists coming out into the population, practicing, insisting that this is a biological problem. However, when I was working at the state hospital, I noticed something very odd. And every hospital thereafter, they never did a assessment, like a what do you call it, a baseline. They never did any test, any lab work, any EKG, EEG, any kind of test to test what the imbalance in the brain was or how much it was. They don't even,
Really? I
the
mean,
truth
they've
of,
never done a test on
no,
the chemistry imbalance that they claim exists.
that they claim exists. They don't have any test for it. They don't even know what the chemical imbalance, the balance of the brain should be to even take a baseline. This was all fabricated lies, and it was made to sell drugs. So the
And yeah, John
antidepressant,
Rappaport told me once that they created a list of symptoms and then they have the drug for that symptom listed, and that all the doctors have to do is look at the list and know what drug to put to what symptom. and it's all done by the pharmaceutical companies.
Yeah, it's completely fabricated. That
Yep.
DSM, their Bible that they're
Yeah,
teaching in the
that's it.
universities.
Yep.
You know, when I was in the doctoral program, that was the Bible. It was like, oh, you need to memorize this. They didn't tell us that every single one of those diagnoses were fabricated. They're chunks of behavior, of the normal spectrum of behavior for humans. There is not a single test for any of those either. There's no lab test, there's no bio test, there's no kind of test for any one of those 197 diagnoses they have right now in that DSM. Those 2/3 of the psychiatrists who made that up were working for big pharma.
Yep.
Right. So they sit there and they go, oh, well, I heard it was like a tobacco barn where a psychiatrist comes in, he goes, hey, I got a new psychiatric diagnosis, man, let's vote on this. And then the pharmaceutical ones go, well, we're going to be able to make a drug for this. And you know, they vote them in and out.
Yeah. I think I can't remember who it was. It was a writer. Michael Ventura wrote a book called "We've Had 100 Years of Psychiatry and the World is Getting Worse." And
Yeah.
he kind of lists how everything has deteriorated since the creation of the pseudoscience, right?
Yeah. And none of those drugs that they have cures anything. You know, all they do is tamp down symptoms. They don't
Right.
cure anything. So 100,000 Americans are diagnosed with schizophrenia every year.
Wow.
And what they did is reduce the funding for research into schizophrenia to a dribble. You know, they did that by manipulating the statistics that NIMH put out to make it look like they're spending, and they cut out a huge chunk of the population, the people on the streets, a huge chunk of the seriously mentally ill population, to make it look like they were honestly trying to fund research. It wasn't doing any good anyway, because you know, they're treating an energetic illness as
Yep.
if it's physical.
That's
You know,
really good way to put
schizophrenia
it.
it's a spiritual disease. So it's like if you got a magnet and you just look at it, you don't see the magnetic field, you don't feel it, you can't touch it, you can't smell it, you can't taste it. For all practical purposes, to our senses, it doesn't exist. Well, the patterns that these things run that you can find on my website, anybody can look there at jerrymarzinsky.com and see that list of patterns for yourself. Anybody who's working in psychology, psychiatry, you can go see those patterns and you will see them for yourself if you know what to look for. Just go
You know,
look at it. All you got to do is open your eyes.
yeah, you read a lot of that in the last time that you were on. It was pretty fascinating. Jerry, I think people should go to your site and look at that. And I think we should talk about that too. Um, you know, 99% of the universe is plasma, and only 1% is solids, liquids, and gases. Yet our physics only looks at the 1% and kind of just ignores the 99%. And it's my contention that there are living plasma creatures that are invisible and that they're all around us all the time. And with special photography, you can see them. And I've seen the photographs that people have made of them. And so you've got to be really careful spiritually that you don't let any of these entities ever get near you or around you or into you. And if you call forth those entities, they're going to come. And so you really need to be careful, really need to be careful. So your conclusion then is that these entities are what is causing schizophrenia and various other mental disorders.
Well, I know, for me, I know that's the truth.
Yeah.
And, you know,
As you
all
talk to
this
them,
stuff, yes, they're nasty.
they are.
You know, they're
I've
very
met them
nasty.
too.
Yeah, I've talked to a lot of them. They don't like me, like you
No, they
said.
don't like me either.
But you know,
You're so likable. I don't understand.
but all this charade that psychiatrists and big pharma are putting on, it's all for money. The antidepressant market in the U.S. is expected to hit $15.98 billion by the 2023. $1 billion. And those drugs don't cure anything. They just, what do they call it? They tamp down symptoms and just flatten you out. They knock out the highs, they knock out the lows, and you're no longer quite human. The global antipsychotic sales. Now, these are the drugs that rot out your brain. They're going to hit 14.54 billion in 2021 and reach 15.5 billion by 2022. These people have no interest in finding a cure for schizophrenia. They have no interest in curing any mental disease because they don't make money off of cures.
Nope.
So one of the reasons I wanted you guys to hear Lynn is because she's the first person. She's been able to see spirits and ghosts since she was a little kid. Her mom didn't beat it out of her, try to talk her out of it. She just kind of kept it quiet because she found out that it wasn't normal and other people didn't see those things either. Now, she's not the first one I've heard that was able to see these things and had to keep it quiet. And since she's a nurse, she had to keep it doubly quiet, kind of like I had to when I was working, in the public sector. But one thing's interesting with Lynn is she did an internship on a psychiatric ward and she was able to see these things.
Man, wow.
So I'm going to introduce her. She's been a nurse for a long time. She's only recently come out and been willing to talk about this because she's near retirement. And if they give her any trouble, she'll just pull the plug and leave.
Good. Hi, Lynn.
Hi. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really looking forward to this and excited to be here.
Yeah, well, I'm excited to have you on. One of my pastimes is reading on Reddit. I go to Reddit and there was a whole Reddit thing of nurses talking about what they'd seen in hospitals. And it was like hundreds of pages of testimony. And it was one of the most interesting things I have ever read in my life. I mean, the spirits and the things that are haunting the hallways. And oh my God, it was just incredible. So I'm really anxious to hear, some of your stories.
Yeah. Also, I've been a nurse for 40 years. I just recently turned 60, and
you look great.
Thank you. 17 been in end-of-life care, where I've seen a lot of people pass away also, and having the gift of seeing them leave their body at the time of transition has been beautiful. But I've dealt with people that are close to death that also are being treated with these medications because they're hallucinating when really they're nearing death and their loved ones are starting to come forward. That the veil starts to thin and their filters start to efface as they get closer, the same as a child has no filters when they're born, and they kind of form over time. But yes, I had gone back to school to further my nursing degree, and I also have a degree in biological science. But since Jerry, I reached out to Jerry because I started checking into his work, and I found it to be very fascinating and dead on. I mean, so many of the things that he talked about, I'm like, I believe this because I've seen it myself. And there was one story that Jerry's heard multiple times about I had gone into the psychiatric ward with the teacher and 8 other nursing students, and we're all standing there. And this is the intake area that we actually had to sign papers that if somebody hit us or bit us or threw something at us, that we couldn't hold the facility responsible. And this one young girl looked to be in her very early 20s, kind of stocky build, comes over and she points at me and she says, "You can help me. I know you can." And of course, in that moment, I was embarrassed because I didn't want to be Lynn the weirdo. I wanted to be Lynn the student nurse that day. And I'm hoping, I'm like, oh, please don't let her be talking to me. And our teacher came along and ushered us into another room, telling us not to make eye contact or to speak to anybody. And
let me butt in here for a second, because I think that's important. In the entire 45 years I've worked in these facilities, I've never seen a researcher on the front lines. And this is why they won't let them sign these forms. We can't take responsibility for your safety, and this don't look them in the eye is totally ridiculous. I mean, that's totally, it's like, don't look at lion in the eyes or something like that. All this research is done in the universities that have been taken over by big pharma. I've never seen a researcher on the front lines, and what Lynn says just attests to that. Go for it.
Yes, and so I actually got placed back into the area that the young lady was in with another nurse, and they had picnic tables that were bolted to the floor. So I was sitting with the other student nurse documenting our notes on our own patients, and the young lady walks over and she sits down with us and she starts talking about, hearing 25 different voices, and how when she was 10, she was molested by the priest or minister of her church. And then when she turned 14, her mother got remarried and the stepfather started raping her, that she ran away at 16 and started doing devil worship. And she realized that wasn't, the thing for her either. But as we're sitting there, I'm looking at her. She has on like a tank top, but very thin spaghetti straps with her midriff showing, and a pair of shorts. And this young woman was covered in claw marks. And I recognize them because as Jay gets further into my book, he will see that I was standing next to a friend of mine in the kitchen of that house. It was a house that was so haunted, I was never able to move into it. And she was clawed to the point of bleeding while she stood next to me. And these claw marks, they looked like a single cat scratch, sometimes as many as 3, but they were thin like that. She had them everywhere. She had them coming out of her ear, coming out of her nose. She had them in areas on her back that there's no way that she could have, at that angle, reached back there and done that herself. She was covered.
I've seen the same thing on the number of patients I dealt with. That same scratches, that there's no way they could have inflicted them themselves.
Yeah, and the thing was, is they were saying that she had self-inflicted them, and she started talking about one of the voices had a very long fingernail and was also scratching her on the inside of her female parts. So I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, this woman's covered in claw marks. These are demonic claw marks. I've seen these before. And she was then called away to one of her classes, or to have her appointment with the psychiatrist to talk to her. And as she got up to walk away, as she got a little bit of a distance away from me, I could see attached to each shoulder, like a pillowcase over each shoulder. And I'm saying a pillowcase because they were connected together like grapes, but they were misshapen, looking like potatoes. Some of them were inverted faces, or sideways faces that she did. In fact, I was looking at her and like, oh my God, this woman really does have, and I drew a quick picture. This is kind of what I was seeing as she walked away from me, that she was hearing 25 different voices because she had attachments on her back. And when she came back from her appointment with her psychiatrist, I went to her room and knocked on the door, and she invited me in, and I said, look, I'm going to tell you something that if you tell anybody, they're going to think you're crazy, and they're going to hold you here longer. I said, but I believe that you are hearing 25 different voices because you've got attachments on your back. And at the time I was going through some personal things myself, and I do remove them off of people, but there's a lot of preparation that goes in that. And at that particular time, I had some personal things going on and I didn't feel kind of up to doing it. But as she turned and went to walk away from me, something inspired me to hook my finger underneath they were like G's, where they were connected in the armpit and at the top of the shoulder, kind of looked like twisted grapevines, but they looked hollow like a horn kind of thing, kind of a tannish brown gray color. And I hooked underneath them and I lifted them off. And when I lifted them off, they started to separate and fall to the ground. And I was stomping as many into the ground as I could. And of course, a few of them ended up rolling away. But I said to her, well, and the funny thing is too, when I told her that I knew about the attachments, her face started to become kind of angry looking or disgruntled facial look. And then she turned around, and that's when I took them off of her, and she turned back around and she said, "It felt like you were pulling grass off my back." Now, she didn't know that I had pulled these things off. And her facial features became more relaxed looking and more normal, not crinkled up and almost monster looking that way. So I told her, I said, "Listen, this is this is a temporary fix. I pulled some of the attachments off of you. However, some of them have rolled over by your bed." Excuse me. I said to her, I said, "When you get out of here, you need to go and find someone that can help you remove the rest of what's here or what could reattach." And I said, "And again, if you repeat what I'm telling you, I'm going to deny it, and they'll end up keeping you here longer. And the goal is to get you out." And lo and behold, I saw her about a year later in Walmart, and she looked so much different. She had a short little blonde bob. She had her makeup on. She was actively in school to become a dental hygienist, versus the way that she looked, almost gray in color, ashen, because they feed off of your energy that way. And I was so tickled to see her. And she told me at that time that she was no longer on any schizophrenic medication, that she was just on a low dose of anti-anxiety medication as needed. And so I got to see, that the outcome of that. But
it's interesting that where those entities were, because I can't remember. I think it's that right area in the back is right where, I'm going to try to word this right. It's right where your entire nervous system entwines. You probably know this because you're a nurse, but and so if you want to affect your entire nervous system of a human body, that's the entrance point that you would go to. And they would torture people frequently by drilling holes in that area and things.
That's where they usually attach too.
Yeah.
Yes.
They're right there behind the neck.
That means that they're using the electrical system of the human body, like they're attaching onto it.
And I want to highlight what Lynn said about them being vampires. They suck your energy. Yep. They're like leeches.
They are.
Yes, they are. That particular week, we were there for the whole week, and that was just the first day. And I was then placed in different areas, and I started to notice that the people with addiction versus the diagnosis of schizophrenia also had attachments on them that appeared differently. And I could go through the facility and pick them out. And I'd say to my friends, "Hey, by chance, does your patient have schizophrenia? Schizophrenia? Yeah. How'd you know?" And I literally only missed one because it was a combination of an addiction issue with attachments. And then they feed on that. There are 3 different types of attachments for addiction, and I'm not sure if I think it's the luck of the draw. I'm not sure if you get.
Okay, I want to hear these 3, but I want to get both of you to tell me, why is it sexual molestation and addiction, especially to hard drugs? Hard drugs and addiction are the same thing. Why are those the 2 variables that seem to cause demonic possession?
Well, one is the trauma. I mean, if you look, there's one common factor to most schizophrenia, and it's trauma. It's either sexual, physical, or emotional trauma. Now Ouija boards is another one, and the single most dangerous drug is methamphetamine. Yeah. The prisoners called that the devil's drug. I don't know what it does, but it opens you wide, and these things just rush in.
Yeah. Very interesting. All right, let's get back to your 3 things, Lynn.
Well, and I agree with Jerry on the Ouija board thing. A person has 16 to get a driver's license, and they have to be 21 to drink, but an 8-year-old can open up a portal to demonic things to enter in onto the earth. They're even making pink ones for Barbie and blue ones for Ken. It's just nuts. But
see, this is a whole world that psychology and psychiatry are completely oblivious to.
Yep.
It's all physical to them, and no mental illness is purely physical. I mean, it's spiritual, it's energetic. Thoughts are energetic, feelings are energetic, memories energetic, and they don't deal with any of that, nor do they deal with spirit at all. It's like they're, trying to fix a machine with drugs, and it doesn't work. None of those drugs cure anything.
That is so true. And also pain issues oftentimes can be an attachment. I had a, for instance, which is
Really?
also Jay's reading. Yes. My daughter, she was 13, 14 at the time, and we were dealing with that house that I wrote the first book about. And I had a couple come as a last resort to finally try to bless the house and get the things out. And my daughter came with me. She had been complaining for almost a week of terrible, terrible shoulder pain. Now, this is like a 13-year-old. I mean, she had never taken drugs before, so it wasn't something like she was drug seeking. I was giving her Tylenol and Advil, but even that wasn't working. I thought maybe, it was her book bag because it was like 50 pounds. So I got her a rolling one. It still didn't seem to help. Finally, I'd taken the weekend off from work to stay home with her. I was going to take her to the emergency room because she was complaining that badly of the pain. And then she finally fell asleep. So that Monday, I had a couple coming to the haunted house where we were not living because, like I said, it was so haunted, I never moved in. And my daughter went with me, and she was sitting there was a planter area, and she was sitting on the bricks in front of the house when the people pulled in. And this was a large half-acre lot, so the driveway was long, and I kind of met them at the beginning of the driveway. And the woman that gets out of the car says to me, she says, "Is your daughter complaining about pain in her right shoulder?" And I'm like, or left shoulder, whichever one that it was. And I said, yeah, how'd you know? I mean, I was like, why would you even ask me something like that? We had never discussed anything like that. And she said, well, she's got an attachment on her, and it's a big one too. And she did something energetically where she took it off from the distance, stomped it into the ground. Her friend was also stomping it into the ground. And she said, ask your daughter how her shoulder feels. So I asked her, I said, hey, Brittany, how does your shoulder feel? And she's like kind of moving. And then she starts doing this round and round thing like a helicopter. And she said, it feels fine. So in that moment, that was removed from her. And a lot of times people have attachments that cause pain in order to have them seek relief through pain medication that they then become addicted to.
Oh, I see. Okay.
And the spirits feed off the negativity that the rippling effect and the drug addiction causes in the family, the job loss, the inability to parent well, and all of those sorts of things, and the money loss. And they feed off of that.
Yeah,
and
they feed off the entire family.
Yes.
A schizophrenic will keep the entire family up in arms all the time, and they're all being drained.
Yes.
Starting to sound like my mom. I hate to say it. That's what she would do. She would just cause disruption after disruption everywhere she went, So
well, and like Jerry said too, there are no tests. They just doctors they have their little check sheet, and they try this medicine first, and well, if that doesn't work, then they try the second one and add it to the first one, and finally where they get somewhere that the person's tongue is so thick that they can't hardly talk, and maybe they're drooling on themselves, then they stop and say, oh, we fixed it, they're not hallucinating anymore. Yeah, but they're not even able to tie their shoe anymore either.
Yeah, it's a merry-go-round. It just goes round and round. So that the side effects of those drugs are so awful, they release them. They go, okay, we've treated them. 6 months later, they're off those drugs again. They come back into the ER and readmit it again. They keep them long enough to burn up all their insurance that they have. Then they release them with more drugs, and it just goes round and around and around, with each circle being like a $10,000 admission. And then they wonder why the hospital cost, why the medical costs are so high. These guys are just soaking it up for doing nothing. I mean, these people aren't being cured.
Okay, so what would you guys do if somebody came to you and said, my 18-year-old son or daughter is schizophrenic, and I don't want them to go on the drugs. They've diagnosed her or him as schizophrenic, and what would you advise them to do? And we're not a medical show or anything. This is all theoretical.
Well, a lot of it would depend on whether the person felt that they needed help and whether they were willing to seek it.
Mm.
Okay. So there's a
Right.
number of things you can do for these things. One of the biggest was kind of devised by my co-author in our book, Sherry Sweeney. She was schizophrenic as a young woman for years, and they almost killed her. And she's an engineer, and she figured out this was like a program. And the way she broke that program was with calling whatever these voices told her and telling them that's a lie, because 98% of what they say are lies. They don't care what they say. What they're after is that negative emotional energy. They need to turn your emotional energy negative before they can drain it from you. They
And
can't
they're
stand
everywhere.
positive energy. Yeah, they're everywhere.
We're not immune, and nobody's immune to from
No.
this. No.
No.
So if you get when I get a negative thought, the first thing I say is, "Oh, that's just bullshit," right? And
Yeah,
then
good.
I
Yeah.
go on, right?
There,
And because I'm not going to let it happen to me, you know. So, but they get into me too. I get a negative thought almost every day. I get one, right?
see,
And
that has the same effect as that's a lie.
yeah, same effect. Yeah,
But
you feel it
and
immediately
see,
dissipates as
but
soon as I do it.
but we're all taught from the time we're kids that every thought that appears in your mind belongs to you.
Yes.
Where else does it come from? I mean, they come from outside. Manuel Swedenborg said you don't have any thoughts of your own. They're all coming from either positive forces or negative forces. And it's the ones you entertain that are going to grow the most. And the
That's exactly.
schizophrenics are entertaining the constant negative ones.
Yeah, and as a person who worked in cinema for many years, one of the reasons I got out was it felt like the producers were purposely okaying projects that would make viewers go to the dark side. And it happened so much that, like you say, it was a pattern. I saw it so many times that I began to think that they themselves might be possessed.
I think you're right, because that makes schizophrenics worse. That's one of the recommendations I give in my practice. Don't watch any negative television. No war pictures, no murder mysteries, no none of that. Even the news, because it feeds them. And you'll see if you go check out that list of patterns that I told you about on my website, you'll see that they match exactly what the mainstream media is feeding us right now. All of them.
Yeah,
It's a
yeah.
one-to-one correlation.
I was struck when you were reading it by how closely it described the modern world.
Yeah.
That just shocked me. I couldn't believe it. And in some ways, this kind of understanding has turned me into a recluse. I'm a little bit worried now when I go out and don't know who's a demon and who isn't. Sorry, but that's how I feel.
Well, you can feel them.
Yeah.
Yeah. And when we were talking before too about addiction, walking through the facility, I could see these little, I call them archons. They look like reptiles. They look like crabs, spiders, and they fit neat little backpacks on people. But the thing that's very distinct about them is that they have a very small head in relation to, here's one of the reptilian ones. Sometimes they have a reptile shaped tail or a human buttocks.
Mm-hmm.
This was brothers. He had a human buttocks. It would precede him in the house before he would come to visit. The thing about it is once one of them have attached to you, even the only way to get them off is to overcome your addiction. However, they never completely leave. They will stay in your home and stay in your surroundings, constantly trying to encourage you to trip up and take that one drink or, smoke that cigarette. I mean, if people could see what I see, even with all of the dead people standing around them on their break, trying to inhale the cigarette smoke and the drink and stuff. And also in the peep show, you're not there alone. You might want to charge admission for what you're doing in there. But they're these heads, they're smaller in proportion. They have this distinct fin that it goes from the top and attaches to the back that's floppy, because sometimes they'll jump ceiling to ceiling. They have 4 bulbous toes on the reptilian looking one, and 4 on the feet that actually attach at the hips, but they never leave you once you have invited them into your life. They're constantly trying to coerce you to go back so that they can continue to feed because they had, a good thing going.
Yeah, and
So
they can't get drunk in the spiritual form. So they have to take over somebody's body and get them to drink or drug in order to get high again. So
Oh,
they're just waiting around for something bad to happen, and then they jump in. They can get the guy to take one drink. So alcoholics and drug addicts got to know that they're not the only ones doing those drugs. They got visitors that have jumped in there, and they want to get high too, and they want to get as high as they can in the period of time they can stay there.
that's very, very true. And also in the case of like cigarette smoke or marijuana, sometimes too, if they don't necessarily want to enter your body, they just want to smell it. But because we have all of our senses when we cross over, of course, we don't have an olfactory nerve to actually smell. It's more of a memory recall for those lost souls that are lingering around. In the case of my mother who has passed over, I asked her one time because she comes through like a megaphone every once in a while. And I said, Mom, don't you miss the taste of potato salad or the brownies that you used to make? Because she had a very unique recipe. And she came back to me and she said, well, we don't eat here. And I'm like, well, yeah, of course you don't, But she said, however, we do everything by thought. If we think of something, we just go. And if we are missing a flavor of something on the earth, all that we have to do is think about it, and it comes to us as if we are tasting it and eating it. So it's a token for someone that's a disembodied soul that has not crossed over, which are these, I believe, that are the attachments on people with schizophrenia or disembodied souls that are looking for a free ride. And then, of course, they're always dominated by something more negative, which is where the verbalizations in the ear that they're hearing comes from as well. And but anyway, I just wanted to add that.
it's fascinating because I don't think I've ever told this story ever before in public, but I was making a film called Infinity about near death and life after death. It's actually my biggest hit film. And I was making it, and I was interviewing John Holland, who is a psychic who used to appear on Oprah and stuff, fairly famous psychic. And I was setting up the camera, and he was late, and he rushed into the room where we were shooting, tucking in his shirt or something. And he sat down, he was kind of sweaty, and he's trying to wipe his sweat off and everything. And all of a sudden he stops. I have to preface this. My mom died about a year before this. And he looked at me and he said, your mom just died. And I'd never met this guy. And I like, wait a minute, how could you know that? But I kept a straight face because I didn't want to feed him any information, right? So I just looked at him and said, yeah. And I just kept working on my camera, getting it ready. And then he said, she really misses you and your brothers. Now that really got me because my mom completely ignored my sister. I only spent time with my brother and my brothers and me. And then I saw, now I'm really kind of weirded out, but I'm keeping it going. And then he said something that really blew my mind because she died of lung cancer. He said, she really wants a cigarette. I'm, whoa. Right. And so at the very end, I'll make it short here. At the very end, we're done with the interview and he's leaving. And as he's leaving, he looks at me and he goes, your mom's name is Rose. And I went, wrong. My mom's name is Rosemary. He had half of her name right on top of everything else. So, and he didn't know me from Jack. He couldn't have looked me up on the internet or anything. He didn't know who I was. So it's proof that not only is there psychic abilities, but the spirits definitely want that addiction.
Yeah. I don't know how many prisoners I've talked to who were locked up for meth, who told me that the voices told them where to be and when to be there. And somebody would show up with more meth. Complete stranger.
Wow. That's heavy.
Yeah.
Thanks.
That is. Well,
Methadone does warrant an investigation, a spiritual investigation, as to why meth addicts are so out of their minds. I mean, there's something there that is just absolutely fits a pattern, and they all go out of their mind, every one of them.
part of it is because of the cells that are being killed with the medication that they're taking.
Yeah.
It's like So
I just met one not long ago he was a bad meth addict. He got locked into a mental hospital. We might want to bring him on, Jay. He talks about what it was like being psychotic on meth, and then he said God came into his life one day. They locked him into a mental hospital for like a year, and he was totally sane. And he tells in detail what it was like to be sane on a mental hospital ward. And now he's working in meth rehab.
Yeah, it is interesting how religious conversion seems to work in many of these cases.
Yeah, he said overnight. It was overnight.
Yeah, yeah, and people should know that it's not the Hindu religion believes that there's these demons. There's jinns in the Muslim religion. We have demons in the Christian religion, and even the Jewish religion has demons. So this is, to me, what I think is that the whole original purpose of religion was to teach us this stuff. That was the whole purpose.
Yeah, you look at the Bible, and Jesus cast out demons 23 times throughout the Bible.
Yeah.
And yet here's the U.S. as a Christian society, and most of Europe just kind of blowing that off like, oh yeah, that's just an old wives' tale. That's just it's ancient people's thinking. No, it's not. No, it's not. They're here right now, and they're increasing their numbers. Look at all the wars proliferating. Look at all the violence on this planet. Look at your dirtbag producers that are producing all this negative garbage for people to consume. I mean, the biggest trick the devil's ever pulled was that he didn't exist. They get people to believe he doesn't exist.
I don't know if I said this the last time, but about 2018, I was going around on YouTube, and I found a show that Alex Jones was doing called How to Recognize Demons. And he had a guest on who I don't even remember now. And this guy, it was fascinating. For about 45 minutes, he was teaching you what facial recognitions to look for and all of this. And I thought to myself, well, if there really are demons, then this guy is going to be taken off the air. And like 2 weeks later, Alex Jones was off the air. And I thought, whoa, that's weird.
Yeah.
He was getting into this exact subject in detail, right? And I took a lot of the things I learned from that show and started applying it in my life. And there are certain things that demonically possessed people do, little quirks and things. I'm not going to discuss what they are because I don't want people to go out after somebody without knowing what they're doing, but they do have little quirks about them. I have noticed that. And so I stay away from anyone that has those quirks.
They like to be acknowledged, but they don't like being exposed. And that's why I'm sure that the person's show was then taken down. So, they do have an intelligence about them. And you don't want to mock them or make fun, because they will definitely show you that they're capable of doing a lot more than just, staring at you. So, yeah,
So
it is.
Did you get have demons attacked you physically?
Oh, yes. In that house, the book that you're reading right now had 2 demons and a young man that had hung himself in the house. And once you get further into it, yes, as a matter of fact, my friend got clawed to the point of bleeding while she stood next to me in the house. I've been in patient rooms where things have been shoved off, picture frames have been shoved off to the floor. And I've been stuck by a needle, which was laying on a table next to me, with a person that they poked into my thigh of my leg. And yes, and demons are above my pay grade. I do help people with them, but only if they're friends or family members, because it's not something that I like to mess with unless I absolutely have to.
Yeah, let's talk about suicide. I have a friend, he's a scientist in Russia, St. Petersburg. And what he did was he would go to the mortuary after someone had died, and he would do a Kirlian photograph of them, of their dead body. Then he would come back the next day and do it again, and the next day do it again. And he'd do this for like 5 days. And then every day the Kirlian body got weaker and weaker until it was gone, except when it was a suicide. when it was a suicide, the Curlian body never left. It
Wow.
stayed there. Even 2 weeks later, they put the cadaver on ice and brought it back. And 2 weeks later, the photograph was just as strong as it was on the first day of the death. And he was like, "Holy crap! Don't commit suicide."
Yeah. They said they're upset when you get up there, they get upset. That you did that. You're not supposed to do that.
Nope.
However, you are not sent to hell. And the reason why it's frowned upon here, as well as on the other side, is because of the rippling effect that it creates for future generations. When you come here, you have a contract of things, of goals that you need to meet. Most of us that are here right now are incarnates, not reincarnates. We have chosen to come in because of the level that we have achieved. You have to be asked to come. You have to volunteer to come, then out of that you're asked, and then you volunteer again out of the group. So we, even having this conversation, we are all at that level. But the thing about it is that when a person has that contract, there are children waiting to come in who might end up being president of the United States or come in and be something else. And when a person ends that contract early, those other beings are not able then to come in to meet their goals, and it changes history. It changes the future of that, and that's the reason why it is frowned upon. They are not sent to hell, although it is very, very. It's not something that you are supposed to do. Mostly for that reason, they are not sent to hell. They are usually, it's all looked at too. And I'm not talking about people that have assisted suicide, like if they're getting ready to pass. They're getting ready to pass, so they're not taking away from their contract. They're just waiting to transition over. People with mental illness that are being controlled by these entities and these disembodied souls that are on this earth, steering them around, those are also it's looked at differently on the other side, because there's more of an understanding that there was something interfering. However, if someone does it just out of spite to get even with a boyfriend or girlfriend or their mother or somebody like that, that's very seen as very selfish, and that is wrong. Normally those people are placed into some schooling. Sometimes they're placed with somebody that is getting ready to commit suicide themselves to try to steer them away, and then they are put right back in to a life, and sometimes the life is even worse than the one that they originally came from.
I've heard that too.
Makes sense. So just for the people watching, the Swedenborg model is that the Earth has etheric planes around it, and actually down under too. And when you die, you go up into one of these levels where you learn things, and then you reincarnate, or maybe you don't. And you really have to read Heaven and Hell by Emanuel Swedenborg to understand this. But this is as real as getting in a car accident or whatever. It's absolutely the truth, and it's fascinating to have both of you on and talking about it, because it's really one of my favorite subjects. And I used to advocate for psychedelic drugs, and I do not anymore. I think they're dangerous, and I think they open you up to all of this. And so I have my own regrets about the things that I've advocated in the past. So it's really about keeping yourself as spiritually clean as you can. Really
and that's one of the things schizophrenics need to do to recover, because they're moving in the opposite direction. They're moving in a hellish direction. The ones who recover have to get on a positive spiritual path and stay there. If they stall out, if they stop, they're going to be drugged back. So they have to get on the positive, and that doesn't necessarily mean religion. I mean, a positive spiritual path. Yep. Swedenborg is, they've kind of turned it into a religion, but he never intended for it to be a religion. He intended it to be information. Yep. Heaven and Hell, Secrets of Heaven.
Great book.
I've read Heaven and Hell probably 25 times over.
Same here. Yeah. Yeah. I used to do his practices and try to get out of the body and go up into those realms. And I actually achieved it a couple of times. So Emmanuel Sweden, when you, oh yeah, Lynn, when you say there's no hell, now Swedenborg says that if you have a heavy soul, you'll go down under the earth into a plane. But I guess you don't think that's hell, right?
I didn't say that there was no hell. There is a
Oh,
hell.
okay.
And I said that people that commit suicide do
Oh, I'm
not go.
sorry. Yeah, you're nuancing it. I get it.
Yeah. So what Swedenborg was saying that, just like here on our planet, all the schoolboys hang with the schoolboys and the biologists with the biologists and the nurses with the nurses, the gangsters with the gangsters. Said it's the same thing. When you die, you go to a place with people who are like you are now.
Yes.
So the ones that go to hell, they don't see it as hell. That's where they want to be. They love torturing people and doing bad things. I mean, they get a kick out of that. They and the ones that go, oh, we want to go to heaven, God lets them in there and they start suffocating to death and they jump headlong back down to where they belong. So he said there's 7 levels in each direction.
In each direction.
There are.
Remember the Simpsons where Bart dies and goes to heaven? He's going up the escalator and he's going to heaven. The clouds are coming in, and then he looks down. He sees the earth below him, so he spits. And the spit hits the Atlantic Ocean, right? Puts a big ripple, and then all of a sudden the stairs and the escalator flatten out, and he slides all the way down to hell, right? And the devil's waiting for him with his Macintosh, going, "Oh, you're early." So, yeah. Well, I'm glad that you believe in hell, because I do too. And I think that some souls do not come back from that place, but I could be wrong. I don't know. Swedenborg seemed to think that you could be redeemed no matter what.
Yeah, he did. He said you can eventually, he even said the devil one of these days will make it out of there. Yeah. But it may take a long time.
Yeah. Wow. Well, and I've got news for people too, as far as religion. I've seen all kinds of people pass away. I've seen Jehovah's Witnesses, Jewish people, atheists, and all of them. And they all have similar things happen at the time of death that people come in, which I'll be happy to tell you on another show if you want, because I know that we wanted to focus on the schizophrenia and this stuff right now, but I'll be happy to share some stories.
I would love to do a show on that. I will soon. In fact, I would love to do a show about what you experienced as a nurse, and it doesn't have to just stick with demons either. I'm sure you saw a lot of other things that are
beautiful. If I may share, Jerry, is it okay if I share the story about?
Go. Yeah, tell them about watching your mother die too. That was fascinating.
Yes.
So I was talking to her close to the time her mother died, and it didn't seem to have any. Most people are bummed out and sad, and not Lynn. She watched the whole thing. She as her mother passed. That's a fascinating story. Tell them that one too. Because I have the gift of second sight, I'm able to see interdimensionally, so I can see spirits. When my mother had cancer, a lot of times people know that they're passing ahead of time. They'll start talking about, will you please give so-and-so my dog, or I'm leaving to go home. And my mother was doing that. She went around the facility and was telling people that she was going home tomorrow. She ended up at hospice that afternoon, and sure enough, she did pass away the next day. But I was the only family member that was able to make it there. My brother was on his way, wasn't able to get there from out of state soon enough. And I'm going to bring it forward. It's, shorten it up a lot, but there's a lot more to it. So I'm sitting in the room, and on the opposite side of my mother's bed, there's this fog like that starts to solidify somewhat, and I could see movement on the other side.
That's plasma. That's plasma. Yeah, it looks like fog. It has a mist.
Yes, the plasma. I'm just writing that down because somebody else told me it was ectoplasm, and I'm like, are you sure? I think it's plasma. But this plasma, this thing, and I could see movement on the other side. I could see sometimes an elbow peek through or a pant leg, and yes, they do show up in clothes because nobody wants to see mom naked. Treat you naked, you'd be like, oh, please, go put some clothes on. But as towards the head of my mother's bed, there was an area that started to thin in a face. And all of a sudden I see my grandmother, my mother's mother, step into the room, my mother's sitting at a slant, and my grandmother comes over to my mother and she starts stroking the inside of my mother's forearm. And she would lean forward and she would say something into my mother's ear. Now, my mother was to the point that she could no longer open her eyes. She could no longer verbalize, but yet when people would come into the room and say, "Hi, Phyllis," she would move her mouth and her eyebrows up and down, and it was appropriate. It was appropriate with them talking to her. So when my grandmother leaned forward and did that, my mom started doing the mouthing thing and the eyebrow thing. And my grandmother would then come away, and she did this 3 different times. And I see this frantic wave behind my grandmother, and it was my youngest sister, and her perfume filled the room. She wore an unusual perfume back in the 80s, and it filled the room. She had been murdered by a jealous boyfriend when she was 20, and she looked the exact same. And she actually came around the crowd of people and embraced me. I could feel her hair falling over my face. I could smell her. It was such a beautiful thing. And then she went back around the crowd, and the whole plasmic wall had effaced, and I could see in there, and there were hundreds, if not thousands, of people in there that had come to receive my mom. And I said to my mom at that time, I said, "Mom, Robin and Grandma are here. It's time for you to go." And she mouthed and did the eyebrow thing. And about 10 minutes later, she took her last breath. But as I'm sitting in the chair, I'm noticing these spirits are gathering, and they're huddling like a football huddle, but like double layered, like a peony flower. They opened up. My mother's spirit was standing in the center, and I'm grinning from ear to ear because the feeling of elation and love that pours through from that other side, there are no words to describe it. There's no feeling that can touch it. It just is. And to be honored to be in that moment, you can't help but smile. So I'm watching all of the people one by one coming and approaching my mother. Some of them I recognized, cousins and some uncles and things that had passed. Some I didn't, but my mother knew who they were. Sure. And she was beaming. And I'm sitting there thinking to myself, oh my God, I look over, my mom has stopped breathing, and I'm like, I better call a nurse, because if a nurse walks in and my mother's just passed away and I'm sitting here smiling, that's not a normal response. Might think that I put a pillow over her head or something. So I called the nurse, and she walks in through, and of course the festivities were still going on. I'm watching all of this, and she pronounces my mother dead. I mean, I could see into there. There are colors on the other side that we do not have here. My new favorite color is over there. You would need like 10 other color wheels. Nope. The lighting was perfect, and it wasn't a light source, but it emitted from within the atmosphere itself.
That's the plasma. Yep.
Yeah, Swedenborg talks about those colors too.
Yep.
That they don't exist on the earth plane.
Yep.
Yeah. And the thing is too, is there were some other beings there that looked as if they were from somewhere else. And the reason why I say that is because there were angels there were loved ones there, but there were also these very, very tall beings with gorgeous white hair like what you have. It was just lighted and luminous. I don't know if they were male or female, but they were gorgeous. They were just perfectly gorgeous. And they were also with the groups. And the reason why I say that they looked like they came from somewhere else is you've got to figure, we're in a universe with lots of stars, and many of those stars are other solar systems just like ours. And there are other spirits and energies on those planets similar to ours that when they finish lifetime, they have to go somewhere too. So they do gather there. And as a matter of fact, when the crowd thinned out after they would come one by one and greet my mother, and it thinned out, and there was a lot more to it than that, but I'm kind of speeding up. And when my mother went to leave, she was with my grandmother, my sister, and there were several other beings walking along with them. 2 of them were angels. One of them was this big, beautiful being that's head actually was like half through the ceiling, and they were tall ceilings walking along with them, helping my mother transition over. And again, I don't know, the superstition about crack a window. She did head for the windows, but it might have just been coincidence, because I've been in a room with patients and there was no window, or they headed in a different direction. But after getting to see that, I wanted to share that. And there are so many more things that have happened as a nurse, if you'd like me to share a couple of those stories as well.
Sure, go for it.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, I had a patient that was, and again, as Dr. Jerry was talking about too, the hallucinations and people trying to be medicated. I had two in particular, two patients that I'd like to share with you. The first one was a blind lady. She was totally, totally blind, couldn't see shadows or anything. I didn't know her that well. She'd only been on my unit for 2 weeks, but her son and daughter, they come to the nurse's station and they say, Mom's talking to people in the room that aren't there. So I said, okay, well, let me walk down there with you and see if your mom needs anything to make her more comfortable. And when we walked in, she was laying at a slant. They're always laying at a slant, but she was laying at a slant and she was reaching up into the air and smiling as if she was being given something extremely delicate, like a fragile snowflake or something. She was being that careful with it, and she was very happy. And I said to her, I said, Edna, I said, who's here? And she said, George. Well, the daughter had to sit down because she said, well, George is my father, and my father passed away X amount of years ago. Then Edna spoke up again and she said, and he's glad that you're taking good care of Pixie. Pixie was Edna's poodle. When her husband passed away, the son took possession of Pixie, who was an older dog, but still very much alive and in his care. And the son said, well, I have Pixie. And he told me the story. And he said, do you think my mom's hallucinating? And I can't just come out and say, no, I don't think she's hallucinating. I think your dad's here. This is normal. The spirits come in. So I said, well, do you think she's hallucinating? And he said, well, I don't know. And I said, well, do you mind if I try something? I said, I'm not trying to change your belief system or whatever, but I've done this a lot of years. To me, spirits do come in and assist the loved ones to transition over. And so he said, yes. And I asked Edna, I said, Edna, can I ask George something? And she nodded her head, yes. And I said, George, what color is your son's shirt? And she said, yellow. Which he was wearing a yellow shirt, but because the filters start to efface and they communicate telepathically on the other side, when a person is in an active state of transition, those filters efface so they can hear the spirit realm as well as they can hear the embodied people in physical form at the same time. So she was able to convey the answer through her that George gave, which was yellow. And he was wearing a yellow Ralph Lauren polo shirt. Wow. So he got it in that moment, and he's like, hi, Dad. He realized that his dad was really there. His sister, of course, was still very uncomfortable with it. But I have another one of my favorite patients. Her name was Abigail. She and her husband had come to the facility because his health was failing. She ended up falling and fracturing her hip, and she was on my unit for a little while. And there was one evening that I came in particular, and she said to me, she says, Lynn, she said, do you think I'm crazy? And we had built up a rapport over time, and I was teasing her a little bit, and I'm like, define crazy, and she said, no. She says, I mean, crazy. And I said, well, no, of course not. Why would you, say something like that? And she says, well, I see my parents. She said, I know that they're both dead, but I see my parents and it makes me happy. And now they're going to start me on a medication for hallucinations. And she didn't want to take it. And so I told her, I said, well, two things. I heard a report that they're going to discharge you in the morning. So you're going to go home. And as your advocate, you can refuse to take it. As long as you're of sound mind, you can refuse to take that medication if you want to. And of course, she was happy with that. She went home the next day. 6 months later, she's on my unit again. She's in an active decline. And this time, and again, I'm speeding it up. This time she was talking about a lady that had a little girl that was coming to visit her. And it was so real that she was taking cookies and cakes from the dining room and bringing them back to her room. And of course, it was creating a bug problem. So we had to stop her from doing that. But there was one day in particular that I usually work the night shift. And there was one day in particular, I volunteered to cover a shift for a friend of mine during the daytime. And so when I came in while I was on the shift, the patients had all been placed back into their rooms, and I started to go down the hallway with my cart to do treatments. And as I passed Abigail's room, I noticed that she's sitting in a recliner with a piece of yellow butterscotch wrapped candy leaning forward. And I mean, there was a picture window with an air conditioner, and it looked like she was trying to feed the air conditioner because of the way she was leaning. So, but then I saw this woman and this little girl standing in front of her, and I thought, oh, Abigail's got some guests today. She didn't have any children, and she was an only child, so she didn't have a lot of visitors come in other than her husband. And I thought, oh, well, how nice that she's got some visitors today. And I took about 3 steps forward, and I realized, I'm like, well, wait a minute. I've been at the nurse's station all this time, and I don't remember them coming past the nurse's station. And we have to have a head count legally, because if there's a fire or an emergency, the fire department needs to know how many people they have to get out of the building. And so I stepped back and I knocked on her door. She invited me in. I walked into her room. It was the door frame, and I could see this. There was nobody there, but I could see this waffling to the air, the energetic waffling.
Right.
I can see spirits clearly out of my peripheral vision, the same as I can see you. If they're at a distance from me, it looks kind of like the reflection of when you're walking up to a mall with a giant plate glass window, that opaque looking thing. But when they're right here, I usually see a waffling to the air. So I know that they're there. And I saw the waffling to the air. And Abigail says to me, she says, I want you to meet my friends. Isn't the little girl beautiful? And I said, yes, she is. And she leans forward and she says, can you see them? And I'm like, yes. And she said, don't tell anybody, because they'll think you're crazy and put you on medication. So here this woman had the wherewithal to know, even though she was on medication, she was still seeing the spirits anyway, because they weren't hallucinations. And she had the wherewithal to know the difference. So, and I thought that was very interesting too. And there's more to that. But
I'd like to hear more. When I was, let's see, my little brother was born when I was 7 years old, and we were really poor. And so my brother and I, older brother, were stuck in one room. And then my sister was literally in the closet of my parents' room. That's how poor we were, right? She was 5.
Oh, wow.
She was 5 and I was 7 and my brother was 10. And they decided that since my mom had a new baby, they wanted to put the baby in the closet and move my redheaded sister into our room. So the 3 of us would all be in this room together. Me and my brother in a double bed, and then a little crappy little single bed, right? Mm-hmm. And the very first night that she was in there, I woke up at about, I don't know, sometime in the middle of the night. And there were 3 translucent figures floating above my sister, and I was only 7, so I had no idea what was going on, and doing something with her. I don't know what. It looked like they were putting their hands over around her or something, and I must have made a noise or something, because one of them turned around instantly and looked at me, and it was a woman, I felt. But short. I'm having a lot of trouble remembering exactly. They must have been short, because they looked like they were about the same size as I was. And she floated over to me and looked me straight in the eye. And then she went like this, and I immediately got paralyzed. I could just move my eyes. I couldn't move my body. She went back to whatever they were doing. And then they kind of whirled and went right through the window, right? Right through the glass. And then, of course, I was completely flipped out, and I talked to my mom and my dad about it, and they said it was just a dream and don't worry about it, right? But I knew it wasn't a dream. And but I lost that ability as I aged. I couldn't see the spirit world anymore. So you're lucky.
Well, the thing is too, is traditional religion and things like that. Growing up, I was born in the 60s. So, those were just things that I mean, I used to see, we lived 3 short blocks behind a hospital. So my siblings and I would see people in patient gowns walking through, and also Indians, because there were Indian mounds on the other side of the hospital. And to us, it was commonplace. It was like, oh, well, there's the toaster, there's the door, and there's a dead person. So it was common, for us, but it wasn't something that my parents wanted to have get out in the neighborhood, because of what the Joneses would think. And plus they would literally come and pick you up in white coats,
Yep.
And take you away at that age. And I was like 5, and I was in the master bedroom with my brother, I was in my mother's jewelry box. And again, that plasma started to build up in the corner. And I turned to show my brother how glamorous I look. And he's fixated on this plasma building up in the corner of my parents' bedroom. And in that stepped in my brother's best friend, mother, father, and brother. And my brother and I ran out of the room to get my mom, and he got her first. And of course, when he brought her in, there was nothing there, and she was upset, and I kept my mouth shut. Of course, he got even with me later in life for that. But anyway, turned out that his best friend and his family was killed in an auto accident that day. So when my brother went to school the next day, of course, the kid wasn't there, and the teacher stood up and announced that, but he was coming in. So that was kind of one the first experiences that I can remember very, very vividly. But with that being said, my mother took a jaunt with the Jehovah's Witnesses when I was like 10, which is a book in itself, but we won't go there. And I was still seeing things. And she took me in front of the elders who told me that I was possessed, told me that what I was seeing was demons, told me that I was going to die in Armageddon. So I got to the point that I was afraid of my gifts, and I would see things, but I would run just as fast out of the room as anybody else, because to me it was a demon. And so when I bought this house that I was never able to move into, and dealing with that as an adult, a single mother with 2 children, it put me into connection with people of like mind, that now I'm starting to feel normal. Oh, okay, so other people have these things too. And that's how everything progressed. So a lot of my gifts came back fold. I used to be able to hear them and see them. The hearing part is intermittent now, and it comes and goes when it wants to. So I hope that someday I'll be able to get fully the hearing part back, and being able to communicate and ask questions and get that back. But yeah, traditional religion and things like that does play a role in dousing out some of the gifts that people have.
They do. There's no doubt about it. No doubt about it. Yep. Catholic Church especially will come down hard on you if you exhibit any of those kinds of gifts. Well, listen, I would like to have you back, Lynn, and talk about your nursing experiences, strange things that you've seen, and some beautiful things that you've seen. Your story of your mom's passing was great. That's just a great story. I'm sorry. It really is. That's almost worth like trying to make that into a movie. That would be good.
I will forward you the book on that, the ebook, if you would like. It is 5-star rated on Amazon. People are loving it. And so, and I would really like to get that out there, because the whole purpose of my writing that book was to take the stigma of death and dying, and to help people that are locked into their religious beliefs, because it's not written based on religion. It's just based on what is, So I'll share that one with you too, if you'd like.
Yeah. And Jerry, as usual, you're always awesome. You bring this work to the world, and I think it's invaluable what you're doing. Your book is amazing. And why don't you guys tell us, how, if you want to, how people can get a hold of you? Jerry, why don't you start first?
Well, you can get hold of me at my website at jerrymarzinsky.com.
I'll link to that.
This the book that Jay is talking about is this one, and it talks about how we came to the conclusion that these voices were not hallucinations. And it gives examples and gives a history of the psychiatric mafia and what they're trying to do.
Great book. I read it in one sitting. It was amazing.
Wow. I couldn't even do that.
Yep. Lynn, how about you? How do people get a hold of you?
And I'd like to say too, Jerry is amazing, and feel so fortunate to be connected with him and being able to help with some validation for his work. He's definitely a trailblazer in this, and it's wonderful. I have a website, www.lynnmonet.com. I can be gotten there also on Twitter, Skype,
I'll link
TikTok. All of those as well. I'm going to be on Coast to Coast with George Norrie again coming up Thursday.
My good buddy. Oh, when you say hi to George for me.
I surely will. I think this is the 4th time that I've been on there, so I will definitely tell him that you said hello.
Yeah.
And but I can be gotten a hold of through my my website, for that matter. I do have a podcast that'll be restarting called Synchronicity, the Next Level Paranormal, that talks about all of this kind of stuff as well, coming up on Tuesdays, 8 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. It'll be starting again in the month of November. So that's how you can find me.
I'm surprised you haven't gotten a reality TV show. I really am.
Well, that's what I was kind of, looking to do. I think that it would be a huge benefit to the community to raise awareness, which is what we're here for, is to help raise awareness and raise energy because of some of the changes that are coming, that we all feel coming. We're looking around us with these things that are happening. They're happening on purpose for this time to shift and change for the better. It's not going to look good right away, but it is eventually going to be for the better. So I would love to do something like that. If you know of anybody that would want to connect me up to do that.
Well,
I've
you
had
never know.
several-
A lot of people
had-
watch. A lot of people that watch this particular show are in the movie business. I know that for sure because I always do updates about the dying business of movies. And but reality TV is a hot product, and psychic stuff is hot right now, super hot. I'd like to see a reality TV show about psychic abilities that's positive. The ones that are on now are kind of downer and negative and just feeding the demonic thing going. And I'd like to see something that actually shows how you can take attachments off people and that kind of thing, because I don't think what we should be wasting our time trying to prove what we're saying is real. I don't think we should spend 1 second on that anymore. Well, if you don't believe it, then don't believe it. That's fine. That's fine. But I think we just need to go into that this is real and what do we do about it? That's really what I'm trying to do here is, and if you don't believe it, that's fine. I don't care. I really don't. But I believe it. I know it's real. And I believe that Jerry has actually become a game changer here. And that your book with Sherry is getting rational people to look at this, because this is rational. What you're saying is rational. You're taking a scientific approach to a spiritual problem. What more could you ask for,
Well, there's also a new energetic therapy out that was put together at John Mace. It took him an entire lifetime to put this system together. It's an energetic therapy. So like I was saying before, thoughts are energy, memories energy, feelings are energy, and that energy gets stuck in a loop in your mind during traumas. I've never seen anything work like this before. Really? I mean, it will go in there and within an hour, these problems that people have been plagued with their entire life just vanish.
This is John Mace, M-A-C-E?
M-A-C-E. It's called the Mace Energy Method. I've been training under it for 2 years. I mean, this is what my therapy session looked like. This is for the month of October into November. Wow. It works that well.
It does. He actually did it on me, and it's remarkable. Because I can tell you 1,000% that it works. It worked for me. And I felt so appreciative to Jerry for letting me be his guinea pig.
and the mainstream doesn't want this out. The universities don't want it out. They took it to the university in Australia. So John Mace was an Australian. They showed him that it worked. And they said, you give us the copyright and we'll consider it. And they went, no, forget that. Then they took it up to the Australian legislature, and they proved that it worked there, and they just blew it off. They don't want anything out there that works.
No, they don't.
This regular psychotherapy, I mean, I've been going through that for, 4 years of undergraduate and 4 years of graduate. It doesn't work.
No, and it's interesting because Wilhelm Reich at the end of his life was starting to reach all these conclusions too. And then they arrested him and threw him in jail and he died. So they don't want, this kind of talk. They just don't.
No.
And I don't know.
They're completely ignoring this, and it works better than anything they've ever come up with in any of the universities.
Well, I'll definitely link to the Mace thing. Go ahead, Lynn.
The nice part about it is, and Jerry, is that you don't have to dredge up all of the crap over months and months of peeling off the layers, or for years and years, and you're still depressed. It is like almost, you don't even have to focus on any. I mean, you don't have to like sit down and tell how you were molested. It doesn't matter. He goes in with what he does, and it picks it all out when you're ready to release it, and it just picks it all out, and it is gone. It's just gone. And
So
it's such a great.
It's an energy cleansing system.
Yeah.
Well, it's an energetic therapy.
Therapy.
So, and what's even more fascinating about it is I don't need to know what the problem is. They don't have to tell me, as long as they follow the instructions I give them. So these people who are molested or suffered these horrible abuses, they don't have to go into the detail about it. I don't have to know. It still works. It's amazing.
Yeah. You know, I heard a story that there are, this is rather horrible, but I think it needs to be told. I was told that there are places that they take children just to traumatize them. That the whole facility is a trauma-induced. That's the whole purpose. And I know people who said they've seen it, and they've actually seen these places.
Well, that's what they created what is it? Adrenochrome with?
Adrenochrome.
Adrenochrome. That's how they create that.
Which, by the way, is mentioned in the film Clockwork Orange by Stanley Kubrick.
Oh, really?
Alex is at the milk bar at the beginning of the movie. It says Synthomesk on the wall, and then it says Drenchrome. Drencrom, Drenchrome.
Oh, isn't that interesting?
Isn't that interesting? 1970, and he knew about it. I mean, when I realized that, I don't know what to say. And what is Alex, the leader of the gang, doing? Causing trauma, running around the streets of London, traumatizing everybody, right? And that's the whole point of the movie, right? And there he is with that word on the wall, and no one can explain it. So I normally would write that whole thing off as some kind of conspiracy, but when I saw that Kubrick went out of his way to mention it, I started having a whole rethink on the entire thing. And that is demonic.
Yeah, and then demons have been around forever, so there's been a lot of this stuff going on for a very, very long time. That is for sure.
That's right. And actually, if you think about it, the film The Shining is all about possession of demons getting into the family and causing them to, murder and all that. So very interesting. Very interesting. And I hear there's a new movie out that's all about this called Nefarious.
Yes.
Have you seen it?
No, but I've heard about it.
Yeah, it sounds like it might be interesting. I thought for a minute that the screenwriter had watched our first show we did together and went, that's a great idea for a movie, right?
Yeah, it's on Prime. It's not out in the actual movies.
Right. Yeah, I saw that it was on Prime. I think I'm going to watch it just for the.
Yeah, I got to watch it too.
Yeah. Well, listen, I want to have both of you back. I want to have Lynn back to talk about her nursing stories, and everybody likes you, Jerry, in my audience, because you're a brave guy and bringing up this really important stuff. That is, if we came to understand what mental illness really is, we could actually make this world a lot better place.
Yeah, it's not what they tell you it is. I'll tell you that.
No, it's not.
Yeah, they're just making money off of that fabrication, and it's hideous what they've done to the entire planet. Those drugs are toxic. They're very poisonous. And they've got hundreds of thousands of kids on this stuff, destroying the brains of these kids before they even have a chance at life.
Yeah, I watched a friend of mine. She was a young woman, and she got on those behavior modification drugs, and I watched her. She began gaining weight, looking pale and pasty, and her personality completely changed. She went from an industrious person to just kind of a lazy person sitting in front of the TV all day. And I watched it. This was at the very beginning when these drugs first came out, and I realized right then and there, man, these are bad news.
Yeah, one thing I found interesting is that the suicide rate of schizophrenics is 3 to 5 times that of the normal population, but so is the suicide rate for psychiatrists. It's almost exactly the same. And these are the people that are running our current mental health system. Their suicide rate is equal with that of their worst seriously mentally ill patients.
And what do you attribute that to?
Well, I attribute that to the dark side also.
So they let the demons get in them too.
Well, I suspect so, because I remember when I went to work for this giant state hospital in Georgia, these psychiatrists were getting beat up by schizophrenics at a rate far above anybody else, far above psych nurses, far above, clinicians, psychologists. Their assault rate was equal to that of attendants that were on the wards with these people 24 hours a day. And I remember thinking back then, I'm like, what are they saying to these people in 15 minutes where these guys are punching their lights out? I just couldn't comprehend it, because they were being assaulted at a higher rate than anybody else. And well,
they are arrogant pricks.
Yeah, a lot of them are. Yeah, I have to say, I mean, a lot of them are.
They are. I've met them. They really think they know everything, and they actually know very little. So
yeah, you ask them, it's why aren't you taking a baseline if schizophrenia is due to a chemical imbalance of the brain? Let them answer that one. Why aren't you getting a baseline? How do you know what's out of balance or by how much? They just sit there because that's what they said in school.
Yeah, exactly right. All right. Well, it's great to have you guys on, and it's just a fascinating subject, and I really appreciate it. So thank you.
You're more than welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah.
My pleasure.
All right, everybody. I am Jay Weidner, and this is Reality Check. Hit like, subscribe, and all that other stuff, and help me get to 40,000. I'm at almost 36,000. I want to get to 40 because apparently you get some special thing in YouTube when you hit 40,000. So anyway, we will be back, and we're going to talk about this important subject more and more, because I know you guys like it, and I think it bears us examining this subject, because it really can make the world a better place if we begin to understand it. Anyway, thank you everybody for watching, and I appreciate it.